Today's daf we're going to learn is Chagigah Daf Chet. Today's daf is sponsored by Leah Shaktiel for the refuah shlema of Nili Bat Esther and Moshe Tzvi. Today's daf is sponsored by Meryl and Harold Sasnowitz in loving memory of their mothers, Molly Pollack and Toby Sasnowitz's Yurtzites. They would have shept much nachat from the family's commitment to Torah. In today's word of their great-granddaughter, our granddaughter, Chavi Summer to Zachariah Rung. Today's daf is sponsored by Amy Goldstein in loving memory of her mother. Okay, we're going to get started. I have to review. There was something I taught incorrectly at the bottom of yesterday's daf, so I'm going to reread the end of yesterday's daf, and with that, we will get started. So correction is never good when I make a mistake. Then you learn something the wrong way. We were just talking about that, so now you have to reread it. Okay, let's go. So we had this Mishnah. We started with Olot. I'm just going back to the Mishnah for a minute. That's an Amud Bet of yesterday's daf of Zion Amud Bet. Olot b'moed ba'ot min hachulim v'ashlamim min ha'maaser. Remember, we had korbanot olah come from chulin, and shlamim, because they're not obligatory, the shlamei simcha, come from maaser. And then we said Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, Beit Shammai omrim min hachulin, uBeit Hillel omrim min ha'maaser. Then we had to figure out why this specifically says Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, and why there's a machlokah Beit Shammai Beit Hillel about this when we just said, right, that the obligatory, if we're talking about korbanot chagigah, obligatory sacrifices can't come from the maaser. They have to come, any obligatory sacrifice, kol haba min hachovah, anything that's an obligation, has to come from chulin money, not money that was already sanctified, like the maaser sheni money. So the Gemara wanted to know why, first, before we even understand really Beit Hillel, they want to know why it specifically says Chagigah Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. Okay, so there were 3 lines from the bottom of yesterday's daf. Ma'ishna Chagigah Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. Why is this day specifically highlighted when really it's referring to any Chagigah on any holiday generally, and we'll see this later today. The Chagigah sacrifice was an obligation of the first day of the holiday. So now, opposite of what I said yesterday, what it means is the Mishnah is specifically referring to the 15th and not the 14th. Yesterday I said it meant the 14th. That was my mistake. It's specifically referring to the korban on the 15th to distinguish it from the korban on the 14th. Okay, now we'll read it inside. Amar Rav Ashi, hakamash malan chagigat 15 in. In means yes, meaning the Mishnah is referring specifically to the Chagigah on the 15th of Pesach, the 15th of Nisan, which is day number 1 of Pesach, and likewise, day number 1 of Shavuot, likewise day number 1 of Sukkot. But why did it specifically mention Pesach? To teach you Chagigat or Ba'asar Lo. This Machlokah Beit Shammai Beit Hillel would not be relevant for Chagigat Yudalid. Why? Chagigat Yudalid, they would both agree that what? That Alma Kasavar, therefore the person writing this Mishnah, okay, the author of the Mishnah holds Chagigat or Ba'asar Lav De'oraita. It's not a Torah obligation. Remember why we have these Yudalid. We have these chagigot to add food to the Korban Pesach so that people eat a la sova, right? They have a big satiating meal. So now, what are we going to say? That those extra chagigot that we bring on Yudalit are not obligatory. Even Beit Shammai will agree that they can come from Maaser Sheni money. So there's no machloket about that. The argument between them is specifically on the 15th. And now we have to understand what's the argument, because according to this, Beit Hillel really makes no sense, because if it's an obligation on the 15th, okay, then theoretically, if it's obligatory, you shouldn't be able to bring it from Maaser Sheni money. So how does Beit Hillel say you can bring it from Maaser money? And that's the next question. Amar Mar. So again, going back to the Mishnah, Beit Hillel omrim min ha'maaser. So we're now talking about Chagigah 15, which is also 15 of Pesach, 15 of Tishrei, 15 of Nisan, 15 of Tishrei, which would be Sukkot, and on Shavuot. Okay, again, the reason they said Pesach was to specifically distinguish it from the night before. We have the one on the day before, which doesn't have a machloket. Everyone agrees it can come from Maaser because it's not obligatory. So now, Beit Hillel says from the Maaser, Amai, davar shebechovah, v'chol davar shebechovah. Anything that's an obligation can only come from chulin. Everyone agrees the Chagigah on the 15th and on any holiday, on the first day of any holiday, is obligatory. So how could Beit Hillel possibly say this? So Ama'ula B'tofel. Okay, now we have to understand what this means. We're going to have a big machlokah. We're going to have 2 opinions. Later we'll see even a 3rd opinion. So what does this mean? When Beit Hillel says, okay, again, the Chagigah can come from the Maser, he doesn't mean all of it can come from Maser money. What he means is some of it can come from, and it has to come, the base obligation has to come from chulin money. Once you get over the base obligation, you can add more money or add more animals. We're going to see there's a debate which one you can add in order to have more meat. Okay. And that can come from Maser. Okay, so let's understand how this works. We're going to have a machloket Chizkiah Rabbi Yochanan, how this works. Chizkiah amar, toflim behema lebehema, ve'ein toflim ma'od lema'od. Each one is going to say you could do it in one way and not the other way. Okay, so each one is going to disagree with the other and say this way is okay, this way is not okay. What does it mean? Toflim behema lebehema means korban chagigah. We already learned, right? There's no you just like rayon and shiur. You can add korbanot olah, right? We had a whole thing. Can you bring more than one? You can apparently bring more than one chagigah. Okay, we'll see some limitations on that today, but theoretically you could bring more than one korban chagigah. So what Chizkiah says is, if I bring my first animal of korban chagigah, my main obligation is the first one. I bring that with chulin money. And then I want to bring more animals. Let's say I want to feed my family. We want to have a lot of meat on the holiday, right? You can do it in two ways. You can bring a korban chagigah, which is a shlamim, you get to eat it, and you can bring shamei simcha. Here I want to bring more korbanot chagigah. So I can bring additional animals that are from the maser money. I could take my maser sheni money and buy with it multiple korbanot chagigah. Okay, multiple animals for a lot of korbanot chagigah. But what can't I do? I can't say this money, I took chulin money, I set it aside to buy an animal, and I have already, remember, Beit Hillel says, shtei kesef for the chagigah. Remember, he says you have to have double the amount for the olat riyah. The chagigah you have to spend more money. I take my shtei kesef, and then I add to it. I want to buy a bigger animal, a nicer animal. Comes Chizkiah and he says, you can't buy your first animal with a mix of money of chulin and maser sheni. You can't say, oh, well, as long as my shtei kesef comes from chulin, I can add more money to it, because your first animal for Chagigah has to be fully and entirely from chulin money. Even Beit Hillel agrees with that. They think, again, this is Chizkiah's reading, you can add, if you want to add additional animals, those animals can come from maser sheni money. And Rabbi Yochanan says the exact opposite. Rabbi Yochanan amar toflim ma'od lema'od, ve'ein toflim behema lebehema. He says, let's start with the end. You can't have animals for korban chagigah, even if you've done your first one, and you want to bring another 5 animals. Let's say you pick animal number 4, you want to have it exclusively for maser sheni money. That doesn't work. You can't do that. Every animal has to be somewhat bought from chulin money, but as long as you have even animal number 1, toflim ma'od lema'od, you can mix money. As long as you put in shtei kesef from chulin, you can add some more maser sheni money to make the animal bigger, to buy a bigger animal. That's totally fine. Okay, so each one says what the other one doesn't. Tanya kavatei Chizkiah, Tanya kavatei Rabbi Yochanan. So the structure is going to work like this: A, B, A, B. Okay, we started with Chizkiah, we went to Rabbi Yochanan. Then we said there's a braita like Chizkiah, there's a braita like Rabbi Yochanan, but now we're going to move to BA. Okay, we're going to start, for whatever reason, they're going to bring the braita. Tanya kavatei, first of all, to Rabbi Yochanan, and then we're going to bring the braita of Chizkiah. This is a good example when you're learning how to punctuate Gemara. So when you see Tanya kavatei to Chizkiah, Tanya kavatei to Rabbi Yochanan, and then you see again Tanya kavatei to Rabbi Yochanan, it looks a little strange, but often the Gemara has an introductory, almost like a topic sentence. They're telling you, now we're going to bring a braita like Chizkiah and a braita like Rabbi Yochanan, and then they say, okay, here's the braita like Rabbi Yochanan, and here's the braita like Chizkiah, right? So they're going to then say, Tanya kavatei to Rabbi Yochanan, here's the braita to Rabbi Yochanan, and they're going to bring it. Misat. Melamed she'adam mevi chavato min hachulin. First, we have to know what this misat word is. We're not going to really fully understand it yet. The Gemara later is going to explain how they got to this. But the verse is from Devarim, chapter 16, verse 10. V'asita chag shavuot la'Hashem Elokecha. Okay, it's a pasuk specifically about Chag HaShavuot. Misat nidvat yadecha asher titein. The word misat is going to come from mas, like tax. Okay, you bring a tax or something like that. Exactly how to translate it is complicated. Nidvat yadecha, right? It's a little confusing because tax is obligatory. Nidvat is like from almost a voluntary thing, but okay. Asher titein, okay, it's nidvat yadecha asher titein. It's going to come from your hands. As God blesses you. Okay, so what are we going to learn from this? Misat. We don't yet know how this teaches this. Gemara's only going to get to it at the end of the sugya. But right now, let's just assume the word misat comes to clearly indicate that it has to come from chulin money. Okay, leave it aside that you don't understand it. We'll understand it soon. But we're trying to bring a braita like Rabbi Yochanan. What did Rabbi Yochanan say? You can mix money, but you can't mix right? You can mix money to have a bigger animal, but you can't take one animal that's fully chulin and then the next animal that's fully maser sheni money. So now he says, the Braita says, how do you know that if you want to mix money, you can? This is going to prove his point. The tuflim ma'ot lama'ot. Talmud lama, kasher v'recha Hashem lokecha. In other words, first the Torah said misat, it has to come from chulin. But then it said, as much as God blesses you, meaning if you have a lot of funds from all different places, which could include, it's a very inclusive term. However, God blessed you. If you happen to have a ton of produce and you took that produce, the master sheni of your produce, turned it into money, and now you have all this extra money, go for it. Go make your korban bigger if you want. Okay, that supports Rabbi Yochanan. You can mix funds, okay, rather than mix it, right, than adding animals that are fully from master sheni money. Tanya kavated chizkiah. Now we're going to have a braita like chizkiah. Misat, it's going to start exactly the same way because the base halacha everyone agrees about, which is any obligatory offering has to come from unsanctified money. Now, Beit Shammai omrim yom rishon min hachulin mikam va'elach min hamaser. So Beit Shammai says the first day, right, you can bring from chulin only. Because what's the first day? The first day is when you have Chagigah obligation. Mikan va'elach, on subsequent days of the holiday, when you're no longer bringing Chagigah, because Chagigah was generally brought on the first day, unless, we'll see later, if you didn't do it on the first day, you can make it up the subsequent days. But now he says Mikan va'elach, which is switching sacrifices. We're no longer talking about the Chagigah then. But Shammai says when you're talking about Shalmei Simcha, min hamaser, you can take from maser sheni. Okay, again, I see there was a question. How do you buy from maser sheni? So I'll explain this again. What is maser sheni? It's the second tithe. It means you have to take from your produce a tenth of all your produce. That's why I said someone might have a lot of produce and a lot of maser sheni money. And what you have to do is in years number 1, 2, 4, and 5 of the Shemitah cycle, you bring it to the temple and you have to eat it there. Now, if you're bringing your actual fruits to the temple, you obviously can't use that for a sacrifice. But most people didn't actually bring them the fruits. They redeemed the fruits onto coins. They put the sanctity onto a coin. They took the coins to Jerusalem, and they had to basically, because Maser Sheni has to be eaten in Jerusalem, they had to buy things that they could eat in Jerusalem with that money. So what are their options of what they could buy? They could buy produce, right? They could buy whatever, but they could also buy meat for animals for sacrifices. And that's what we're saying. Can you, basically it's, right? Can you kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Can you also use your Maser Sheni money, spend it in Jerusalem? And can you spend it for sacrifices? So obligatory sacrifices, you can't, because obligatory sacrifices have to come from unsanctified money, and Maser Sheni money has sanctity to it, because it basically, you took the sanctity from those fruits that have to be in Jerusalem, so they have sanctity to them, and you put them on a coin. Those coins are already sanctified, so you can't use them for obligatory sacrifices, but you can use them for extra Chagigah. Now, again, extra Chagigah means what? It depends whether you're Chizkiah or Rabbi Yochanan. Does extra Chagigah mean a bigger animal, meaning your 2 shtak kesef you spend from chulin, anything above that you want to buy a better, bigger, fatter animal, you can with Maser Sheni money, right? That was Rabbi Yochanan. No, yeah. Or Chizkiah, who says, no, your first animal has to be exclusively chulin. If you want to bring additional Chagigah sacrifices, because you want to feed more mouths in your family from Chagigah sacrifices, then the additional ones can be brought from the Maser money. Okay, so that's how we use it, Maser money, to buy this. So now, again, we're in the second braita, the proves Rabbi Yochanan. So we start off with, right, you can bring your chovah only from chulin. That's from misat, same as the other braita. But then we're in Chizkiah, my mistake. Tani Kavatei Chizkiah. And then Beit Shammai said the first day has to come from Chulin, because the first day is the Chagigah sacrifices. Subsequent ways, when you're bringing Shalmei Simcha, you can bring from Maaser money, because those are not obligatory. That already we learned, right? Beit Shammai only thinks that Shalmei Simcha can come. Remember, this was everything we've been explaining about Toflin is only according to Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai doesn't think you can ever bring a Chagigah from Maaser money. Only the Shalmei Simcha, which are 100% reshut, optional, those you bring from Maaser. Ubeit Hillel blame, and here's the part that proves Chizkiah. Again, Chizkiah says, just to get it straight in your head, Ein toflim ma'od lema'od. You can't add money, but you can add extra animals. So now, Beit Hillel says, Achila rishona min achulin, which right now we're going to understand that as what? Your first Chagigah sacrifice has to come exclusively from chulin money, your first one, which means Ein toflim ma'od lema'od. You can't mix funds to get that first animal. Mikan va'elach, but if you want to add additional animals after that, go for it. Min ha'maser, you can do it from the maser. Okay, so that proves Chizkiah's reading. Now the Braita is going to just continue, and we'll deal with this line in a second and explain it. Ush'ar kol yemot haPesach. If you want to bring other sacrifices on the other days of Pesach, which we already said, that's Shalmei Simcha, that's not Chagigah. Remember, I'm talking all along about 3 sacrifices. Olat Riyah, which is one that gets burnt entirely. We don't eat it at all. Shalmei Chagigah, which is our main topic right now. Can you buy some of it with Maaser Sheni money or not? And Shalmei Simcha, which are 100% optional. Those are different, right? The obligatory ones are the Chagigah and the Ola. So now they say, the rest of the days of Pesach, Adam Yotzei Yodei Chavato b'Maaser behema. This is what we saw in our Mishnah, that if you want to eat on the rest of the days of Pesach, which are for Simcha, and you just want to have meat to rejoice on the holiday, so then you can use all sorts of other obligations, right? Again, this is the idea of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Well, you have your tithed animals. They would take 1 every 10 animals. Okay, where do we see this, by the way? In Unatana Tokef, which is the prayer we say on Yom Kippur. And we say that we're like sheep passing through the Shevet, right? That God is like judging us one by one. What is that? That comes from the idea of Maaser Behema. This is, they would take the 10th of every animal. They would put them through a narrow doorway. They would go 1, 2, 3, 4. They would use their shevet, which is a stick, their staff. They would, kind of count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When they got to the 10th, they would mark that animal. That's Maaser Behema. And you would have to bring it just like Maaser Sheni. You'd have to bring it to Jerusalem and sacrifice it there. Okay. There, you don't redeem it. You would actually just bring the animal. Now, here they're saying, well, if you're supposed to bring it to Jerusalem and eat it in Jerusalem, so you can use that also you can sacrifice it as a Shalmei Simcha, because again, it's an optional offering, so it's no problem to use something that's already sanctified. So now the Gemara just asks a side question on this last line. It says, Shar kol yemot Pesach, which means the rest of the days of Pesach. What about on the first day of Pesach? B'Yom Tov, my time alo. Sounds like you can't use Maaser Behema if you want to do a Korban Shlamim, a Shalmei Simcha on Yom Tov. Why not? So they say, Amar Rav Ashi, Dil ma'ati lasure b'Yom Tov. We don't want to allow you to use Maaser Behema animal on Yom Tov because we're worried you might actually do the tithing on Yom Tov. Now, why should that be a problem? What's wrong with taking the 10th one and designating it on Yantif? Well, one of the things they did after, imagine you have all your herd of animals, right? It's all the animals that were born that period. Okay. You would do it a few times a year. Talk about all this later in the Shas. We'll get to this more in detail. But basically what you do is you count your animals that were born in a certain period of time, and you take the 10th of every one. And then, well, you don't want it to get confused. So you mark it with red. Okay, sikra is red, a red dye. So you would mark it with a red dye. That you can't do. And that's when you did the Maaser, you would mark each 10th animal with a red dye. Can't do that on Yom Tov. So because of that, right, it's Isser Malacha, one of the 39 melachot that you can't do on Shabbat is to dye something with a color. So therefore, it says specifically in this Braita, this is a total side point, Shar kol yemot Pesach, you can use your Maaser Behema for your Shalmei Simcha, but not on the first day when it's Chag. Okay, now, my mashma, the one thing we're still left with understanding is how did we get from Misat to Chulin? Okay, we just passed Purim Katan and right the 2 days of Purim Katan. So here we get Purim in our Masechet. My mashma dahai misat lishana dechulin. How do you know that misat means it has to come from chulin money? It can't come from something that's sanctified. Remember, chulin is unsanctified. Dichtiv vayasam hamelech Achashverosh mas al haaretz. Achashverosh put a mas on the land. Mas is a tax. What do you pay your taxes with? You certainly don't pay it with sanctified money. Sanctified money can only go to buy things for the temple, right? Things that are sanctified. But you can't use sanctified money to go, right, or, things that have to be eaten in Jerusalem. You certainly don't use that to pay your taxes with. So therefore, we learn that misat comes from mas. It can only be chulin. Now, going back to the Mishnah had listed all kinds of things that people can eat to fulfill their obligation of simcha, of shalmei simcha on the Chag. So we said the Israel, I'm just going back to the Mishnah for a minute. They can take, I promised, I vowed to bring an offering to the temple during the year. I can bring that on the holiday, and that I can, again, kill two birds with one stone. I can both have that count for my sacrifice, and I can also have it count for my obligation to bring my vow, right? In other words, that and shalmei simcha. The Kohen can take all the meat that the Kohen's supposed to eat, like chatat, asham, right? Those are the meats from other people's sacrifices that go to the Kohen. They can eat that as part of their obligation of simcha. And bechor and chazeh v'shok, all these gifts that went to the Kohanim. But what can't they do? All these people can't use ofot and not menachot, not birds, right? And chicken, and not menachot, meal offerings. So now we're going to see where we get that from. We're going to have two different people who prove it from different sources. Tanu Rabbanan. So the Braita says, "V'samachta b'chagecha," should rejoice on your holiday. L'rabot kol minei smachot l'simcha. This means any kind of way that you rejoice, you fulfill the obligation. Mikan amru chachamim. So from here they learned, what does it come to include? It sounds like a very inclusive term. Samachta, anything that's simcha. So what? מכאן אמרו חכמים, ישראל יוצאים ידי חובתם, בנדרים ונדבות, ומעשר בהמה, בכהנים, בחטאת, באשם, ובבחור, בחזה ושוק. This exactly teaches our obligation, what we just said in the Mishnah. You can be yotze your mitzvah of simcha with other things that you're obligated to bring in any case. You vowed to bring something, you have gifts that you got as a Kohen, all that, you can fulfill it because it's a very general term of samachta. So then they say, well, if it's so general, and yachol af ba'ofodu menachot, then maybe you should be able to do it with chicken and meal offerings. Talmud lomar v'samachta b'chagecha. No, because it says chagecha. What does chag mean? And we're going to have a whole debate about this on Daf Yud. But right now they're going to assume, what does chag mean? Chag means korban chagigah. Now, korban chagigah has to be an animal offering. We already learned that. So misha chagigah ba'amehem. Yatzuelu she'en chagigah ba'amehem. Because it says b'samachta b'chagecha, so chag means animal sacrifice. Since we're going to say there's also a chiyuv of simcha, like chagecha, whatever the chagigah can be brought from, also the shalmei simcha can be brought from, and that means only meat. So the first drasha, okay, this is in a Braita. They learn it from v'samachta b'chagecha. V'samachta includes all these other offerings, however, limited only to meat, not to anything else, because of the word chagecha. Comes Rav Ashi Amal means v'samachta nafka. He says you can learn it just from the word v'samachta. Why? Yatzu elu she'en behem simcha. These other things, birds and chicken and meal offerings, those don't bring simcha. Okay, meat is the only way you get simcha. And I like to say the nafkamina, what's the practical difference between these two approaches? Theoretically, one could say, right, there's vegetarians, vegans, right? People could say, what do you mean? I get simcha in some other way. So simcha for me is not through meat. So theoretically, if you took Rav Ashi, then theoretically you could redefine simcha in a different time period or a different context and say simcha is really something else. But if you hold it's v'samachta b'chagecha, and it's specifically what the Chagigah comes from, it doesn't matter, vegetarian, vegan, or you don't like meat, you prefer chicken, doesn't make a difference. It's very clear from the verse that we mean specifically meat. So that's a good difference between these two approaches. So now they say to Rav Ashi, well, Rav Ashi, what does he do? He wasn't there, but they're asking about him. What does he do with b'chagecha? Because he just learns it all from simcha. So why does it say b'chagecha? He needs it for Rav Dania bar Katina. Rav Dania bar Katina marav. Minayin she'ein nosim nashim b'moed. We learned this in Moed Katan. How do you know you don't marry? You don't get married on the holiday. Your simcha has to come from the holiday and derive from that, and not that you're happy with your new wife. If you get married on a holiday, you're going to end up, your happiness is going to be due to your new marriage rather than to the holiday. So therefore, we don't allow marriages because of a samachta b'chagecha, and that's what he uses that drasha for. Okay, before I start the next Mishnah, I see there's a ton of things going on in the chat, and I just want to understand what the confusion is about. So yeah, I hope people understood this, but I'm not sure. It seems like there's some confusion of Maaser Sheni. So again, when you take your tithe, you tithe your produce. Let me just even go back. You take truma, right? You take a little bit, you give to the Kohen. Then you take a tenth, and that goes to the Levi. And then you take a second tenth, which again, it depends what year it is. Years number 3 and 6, you bring that to poor people. But years number 1, 2, 4, and 5, you're commanded to bring it to Jerusalem. Okay. So when we talk about Maaser and Staka, that's not right. This is an obligation. That's something else. We talk about Maaser and Staka money. It's first of all this is Staka. You're giving to the Levi. The Levi doesn't have produce. You're giving the Levi Maaser. This is a different thing. This is Maaser Sheni. Okay. It's an additional tenth of your produce that has to go to be brought to Jerusalem, but it's for you. It's your own. It just has to be sanctified in the sense that you bring it to Jerusalem and eat it there. And again, then you don't necessarily need to eat it there. You can just turn it onto a coin, redeem it, and bring the money to Jerusalem. Okay, so again, years number 1, 2, 4, and 5. The second, that's why it's called Maaser Sheni. It's the second tithe. The first tithe goes to, and as the first tenth goes to the Levi. Again, before that, you have, let's say, 100. You take already 1/50th. Again, for Kohanim, it's 1/50th, 1/60th, or 1/40th, depending on how generous or not generous you want to be. But that goes to the Kohen. From whatever's left, you take a tenth and you take that for the Levi. The Levi himself has to take a tenth of what he gets and give it to the Kohen. And then you take a second tenth of whatever's left from there. And then, right, so your first tenth is going to be 9.8 out of 100, right? Because you're only left with 98 at that point. Then you're left with, after you drop the 9.8, then you're already less and you only take a tenth of what's left. And then you take that and you bring it to Jerusalem. That's what we're talking about. I hope that resolves your questions. Okay, next. We're now going to have a description in this Mishnah of different kinds of people with different financial means and different family situations, how many people they have in their household. So Misha Yeshlo Ochlin Mirubim, you have a lot of people to feed, Unechasim Muatim, and not a lot of money. Now the question is going to be, what's your ratio between how many korbanot chagigah you bring and how many olo re'iyah you bring? Remember the big difference between olo re'iyah and korbanot chagigah. Chagigah, the owners get to eat. Olat re'iyah, all gets burned. So if you don't have a lot of money and you have a lot of mouths to feed, then mevi shlamim merubim, you bring more korbanot chagigah because they're shlamim. Shlamim means you get to eat them. You eat the meat from it. Ve'olot muatot, but you bring less korbanot olah because you can't afford it, right? And those get burnt. They're not going to help you very much. So you bring the bare minimum, but you add korbanot chagigah because you need to feed the people in your household. Nechasim merubim v'ochlim muatim. What if you have a lot of money and not a lot of people in your household? Maybe olot merubot shlamim muatim. Right, then you're going to bring a lot of korbanot olah because you can afford it. Bring more olot riyah. Bring less shlamim because you have to remember, not only do you get to eat the meat, but if you don't eat it within a certain time, you have to burn it. It's called notar. We don't want to have leftover. So if you don't have a lot of people to feed, mouths to feed, then don't bring a lot of korbanot shlamim. Let's say you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of people. That's what the whole machloket was, right? 1, 2, right? Which do you bring more of, chagigah or ola? But that's for someone that's the bare minimum. If you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a lot of mouths to feed, so then you do your bare minimum. If you have both a lot, everyone should do as much as they want, as much as God blessed you. If God blessed you with a lot of money and a lot of family, a lot of people, great. Just, Bring as much as you can. So there you have your different options. So the Gemara starts off with a big question, which is, the first case, Shlamim Merubim, we had someone who has a lot of mouths to feed, but not a lot of money. So it says, bring a lot of korbanot shlamim, right? Which is the Shalmei Chagigah, to which the Gemara says, Mehe chamaiti, halele. How can he possibly bring a lot of shlamim? We just said he doesn't have a lot of money. So where's he getting that from? So Amar Rav Chisda, tofel umevi pal gadol. We get to this tofel again. What does it mean? Well, if you don't have a lot of nichasim. Nichasim means you don't have a lot of assets. But what you probably have produce in your field, and you're bringing the Maser Sheni to Jerusalem. So here we have Shalmei Chagigah, which we already said you have to bring specifically from Chulin, but we learned that you could be tofel. Remember what that means. What that means is you can bring, right? So let's see the way Rav Chisda says it. Tofel umevi par gadol. When it says bring a lot of shlamim, what does it mean? It means you don't have a lot of money to add, but you do have your Maser Sheni, which anyway you need to go eat in Jerusalem. So take that money and invest it in buying yourself a much bigger animal so that you can feed all the people in your household. So this matches what Beit Hillel said, and it matches the opinion that you can be tofel ma'ot lema'ot, you can mix money to buy a bigger animal, but he doesn't say you can buy more animals, right? You would have thought, right? So it seems clear he holds you can bring ma'ot, you can be tofel ma'ot lema'ot, but you can't be tofel be'emah le'be'emah. At least that's what we would think based on the previous sugya where we learned the Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan debate. One says you could do it one way, one says you could go the other way, but nobody thinks you could do both. So Amalei Rav Sheshet questions him and says, Hare amru toflim be'emah le'be'emah. But we learned that you can do be'emah le'be'emah. So why didn't you say bring an animal, right, from Chulin, and then bring multiple other animals from your Maser Sheni money? Why did you specifically say tofel umevi par gadol, which is toflim ma'ot lema'ot? So now we want to understand Rav Sheshet's question. What really was he asking him? My ka'amrle, ilema hachi ka'amrle. If you want to say this is what he said, hare amru toflim behema lebe'ema aval lo ma'ot lema'ot. If Rav Sheshet is questioning him and saying, you can't do what you just said because that's ma'ot lema'ot, and you can only do behema lebehema, meaning you can't combine money of Chulin and Maser Sheni to buy a bigger animal like you said, but you can do behema lebehema, buy your first animal, Chulin. But then since you can't afford it, but you do have this Maser Sheni money, use that to buy your other animals. So then he should have said, think about what Rav Sheshet said. Rav Sheshet asked him, right? He said, Hare amru toflim behema lebehema. So why didn't you say that? If he wanted to say you can't do what you did, well, then he should have said, Hare amru, right? Hare amru toflim be'emah lebe'emah, but not ma'ot lema'ot. V'le'male, he should have said, Ein toflim ma'ot lema'ot. He should have said, you can't do that, right? Remember, each person who said you can do one said you can't do the other. So if he was trying to tell him, you should have said be'emah lebe'emah because you can't do ma'ot lema'ot, then he should have worded it as, you can't do it that way. But he didn't say that. So from the fact that he didn't say that, what can we assume? This is why I said there might be a third opinion. What he's telling him is because he worded it in the positive and not in the negative, and it's saying you can't do that, but he said, why didn't you say you can do it this way? What he was saying is, why didn't you say you can either go that way or go that way? In other words, he didn't think that you can't add money and buy a bigger animal. He thought you could. But he's saying to Rav Papa, why don't you give both options? Why don't you say either add your Maser Sheni money to get a bigger animal or buy your first animal with Chulin and then add additional animals with Maser Sheni? Why didn't you suggest that? Now, then the question is, come on. Well, then according to who does Rav Sheshet go? Because according to this reading, Rav Sheshet, and again, we're implying this from what he said and what he didn't say. The fact that he didn't say you can't do it that way, we assume he means he was suggesting an additional option, in which case he doesn't match Chizkiah or Rabbi Yochanan. Now, that would be strange, although not so strange. Why? If you want to suggest that Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan argued, Rav Sheshet's an Emora, he can argue against them. They're all Emoraim. Right? They're all people from the time period after the Tanaim. They can argue with each other. So maybe we now have three opinions. We have Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan who each say one way, not the other. We have Rav Sheshet who says you could do it either way. Both are possibilities. And then you'd have to say, maniata lo pligi. But what did we show last time? We showed there was a bright to support Rabbi Yochanan. There was a bright to support Chizkiah, but there's no bright to support Rav Sheshet. But maybe you could say maybe the bright could be read some other way. Okay, well, let's see. So they say, v'haktane, if you want to try to explain the second bright that we brought there, to say that maybe it fits that both are options, haktane achila rishona min achulin. But look at that second source. That second source, which is the one that they think maybe could be read both ways. It says there, Beit Hillel omrim achila rishona min achulin, mikam ve'elach min hamaser, which seems very clear. The first achila has to come from chulin exclusively, which means ain't toflim ma'od l'ma'od. So I don't know how you could read that bright to that way. To which the Gemara answers, no, you could. My achila rishona, when it says your first achila, your first korban has to be from chulin, and it sounds like chulin only. What it means is shiur d'me'achila rishona min chulin. It means the minimum amount to get to, meaning the shtei kesef, the first minimum amount that could go to a korban chagigah has to be from the chulin money, but you can add to it other money. And then we basically reread that Tanaitic source that we thought supported Rabbi Yochanan. Now we can also read it in a way that it supports Rav Sheshet as well. So we end up with three approaches. Rav Sheshet comes along. It's actually interesting. They didn't bring this in the previous Mishnah. They bring it only here, but it clearly connects with the machloka we saw in Amud Aleph, which is that there's a third approach, which is you can both do ma'od l'ma'od and behema l'behema. They're both possibilities. And we now explain this braita to support Rav Sheshet's reading. Last part for today. We're now going to a new case. Amar Ula. We're going to have a machloket Rish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, to which Rabbi Abba is going to say they actually don't disagree. They're actually talking about different situations. Amar Rish Lakish. Shefrish eser behemot lechagigato. If you designated 10 animals to go for your chagigah sacrifice, hikriv chamesh b'yom tov rishon. Remember, your main obligation is on the first day. If you do it subsequent days, it's only kind of makeup for the first day. Okay, but the main obligation is on day number 1. So it says here, if you did 5 on the first day, Yom Tov Sheni here doesn't mean the last day of holiday, the way we usually call Yom Tov Sheni. It means the second day of the holiday. We have this in Sukkot also, where in Masechet Sukkah, where Yom Tov Sheni meant the subsequent days, Chol Hamoed, right, the second day of the holiday. So that's what it means here. Also, the next day you can sacrifice the others, or the subsequent day, doesn't matter. Rabbi Yochanan Amal, if you designated 10 animals and you only sacrifice 5 on day number 1, you can't sacrifice any the next days. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's a problem of what we call Bal Tosif. You're only allowed to do Chagigah on day number 1. When you do it on day number 2, it's kind of makeup for what you didn't do on day number 1. But in this case, you sacrificed already 5. If you're going to do 5 today and 5 tomorrow, it's going to look like Bal Tosif, like you're adding on to the mitzvah. Like you think there's a mitzvah to do Chagigah on day 1, and there's a mitzvah to do Chagigah on day 2. And that's a problem. So now, Amar Rabbi Abba v'lo pligi. They're actually not disagreeing. They're each talking about a different situation. Kam b'stam, kam b'mefarish. So now they say, if you specified and you said, I plan to bring 10 of these on day 1 of the holiday, and then for whatever reason, you didn't. That's okay. That's Rish Lakish. He says you could bring 5 tomorrow because it's clear to everyone else. Again, this seems to be an issue of a bit of Marit Ayin. We're worried about what other people think. It's clear that you're not adding on to the mitzvah because you said I'm bringing them all today. For whatever reason you didn't. We don't know why you didn't, but it's okay because it's clear you think there's an obligation only one day. And what you're bringing the next day is just filling in for the previous day. But now, right, it's tashlumin, exactly. This is what we call tashlumin. It's makeup for what you didn't do today. But if you did it bestam and you didn't specify and you just said, I'm separating 10 for Chagigah and you brought 5 today and 5 tomorrow, well, that looks like you think that the obligation for Chagigah is on every day of the holiday or on multiple days of the holiday. And that's Bal Tosif because your obligation is really only one day. So now they say, Hi stam hechigami. This case of stam, what exactly is the case? So they say, let's say there was a long line in the temple and you just didn't manage to do it. You got your first 5 in, but they didn't have time to do the other 5. If that was the case, well then, then it's obvious that you didn't do it because you ran out of time and not because you think there's an obligation on day 2. Then it's for sure fine. And number 2, if delay le ochlin, there's another, ela delay le ochlin, maybe you don't have enough people to feed. What's the problem? I told you before. It's going to end up as nota. It's going to end up as leftover meat. You don't want leftover meat. So if you don't have enough let's say you separate 10 animals, but then, I don't know, half your family disappeared or something happened. They weren't around, or I don't know why you separated 10 in the beginning, but for whatever reason, you realized my family's not so hungry. They're not going to eat all this food and I'm going to end up with leftover meat and I don't want to end up with leftover meat. Well, then again, you have a good excuse. Anytime you have a really good excuse why you didn't do it, then even if you did it bistam, we're not really worried that anyone's going to think it's bal tosif. So that's what they say here. If delele ochlin, you don't have people to eat it. Hi, delo akravinu. The reason why you didn't sacrifice is delele ochlin. So lo tzricha deika shehu b'yom v'ile ochlin v'dibakama lo akravinu shmamina shiure shayunu. So it must be there was enough time in the day and you had enough people to eat, but you didn't do it anyway. If that's the case, then that's where Rabbi Yochanan says that bistam, if you didn't specify, people are going to think since you had no good reason why you didn't bring it the first day, it will look like you're adding on to the mitzvah and you think that Chagigah is a mitzvah on multiple days of the holiday, which it's not, and therefore it's a problem. The hachinami mistabra, and it's actually really logical to say that Rish Lakish, what Rabbi Yava said, Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan aren't disagreeing. They're just talking about different scenarios. Because remember, Rish Lakish said it's fine. Rabbi Yochanan said it's not fine. And then we just said, well, Rish Lakish was talking about when you specified. Rabbi Yochanan was talking about when you didn't specify, and it's going to be a concern that's going to look like Bal Tosif. So now, hachinami mistabra, this answer, this explanation makes a lot of sense. Why is that? When Ravin came from Eretz Israel to Bavel, and he brought the Torah of Rabbi Yochanan from Eretz Israel, he said that Rabbi Yochanan says the following. Now pay attention, because this is going to be the exact opposite of what we said Rabbi Yochanan said. He separated 10 animals for your Chagigah. He kriv 5 b'yom tov rishon. You did 5 on the first day. Chozer makriv 5 b'yom tov sheni. You can bring the other 5 on the next day. Now, kashina hadade. That statement of Rabbi Yochanan directly contradicts what Rabbi Yochanan said, that we said, Rabbi Yochanan said, Elalav shmamina, it must be kam bistam, kam b'mefarish. The distinction is, did you specify, didn't you specify? And that's why Rabbi Yochanan in the end doesn't disagree with Rish Lakish. They were just talking about different scenarios. And we proved it because Rabbi Yochanan in one place, we said Rabbi Yochanan says this. In the other place, we said Rabbi Yochanan says the opposite. It must be there were different situations. One is you specify, one is you didn't specify. We're going to stop here because the next thing continues on to the next page. But what I want to just point out is this fascinating concept that comes up from this, which is you can do the same action, which is take these 5 animals that you designated and sacrifice them the next day. And it really all depends on whether you specified or didn't specify. That makes all the difference in whether it's considered Bal Tosif or not, right? And it's how your actions are perceived based on what you say beforehand, right? Whether we look at this, it's the same thing. You're sacrificing 5 animals the next day. Is it looked as I'm doing tashlumin, I'm making up for what I didn't do yesterday? Or is it that I'm actually adding on and I think that there's Chagigah for the next day or not, right, for the next day? So it's a very interesting concept and requires more thought. Okay, we'll end with that for today. Have a great day, everybody.